Yeah. Yes. So guys, feel free to grab some pizza in here. We have drinks as well. We're going to start very.
Era muito boa. Não era fresquinho, não.
Hi, sorry.
I don't know how it's gonna turn out.
You really appreciate that. That's perfect timing. Before the.
They leave that.
I figured I would.
Normally Zoom, the people are just getting the pizza and we're gonna start in a few minutes.
Get out. So guys.
Yeah. I don't know.
Every time I have a party, I will eat that.
Oh, yes, I'm sitting there. It's like.
How are you?
We had to be bought a facade. Kind of. So yeah, it's really nice. There's basically the usual because they need to be your working. Get to be
I do IT too.
What happened yesterday, Leo?
Almost that.
With our second team?
And lots of.
The guys are waiting to
Next week is Brazil, right?
Find some time to write.
I think it's
Writing
next week.
and papers.
You have kids.
Yeah, so halfway through. But publish the papers for my manager. That's the ones that I.
No,
It always takes
we have a good history in Brazil. Brazil.
yeah, so I think that
I think we won like 70% of the time that we
There's
play
another
against
one
Brazil.
already, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last year was one
I sent.
or 1-0, I don't know.
Signed one just to
Okay,
be hard, yeah.
okay.
I think they sent to him all the copies.
But we have the semifinal.
He has all the documents.
All the
He
documents.
always shows me everything to double check. Pedro's first, and now he's just.
Then we have the final.
Gonna help him with.
To play the final, then we are going to we're going to play in Brazil.
Very excited for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we to Carlos Lee said that he did pretty well.
Did you take out?
But when I first spoke to you. Okay. Every single day, yeah, he learned and he's so. Also trans. Intermediate. I'm very proud of you.
That's nice. Because he did, but I didn't. But
Está buena, bien, bien rankeado.
He has been studying and everything. Really. Read a little bit for the mind.
Or-
It's. Water, I'll be right back.
I've got it here, Andy. Doors, yeah.
Oh, this is still sitting here. You wanna take it?
I actually to by camera, but I think you didn't see. I don't know. What? No. So, how many cases did you see?
Sorry, I thought, I never, sorry. I was, yesterday I was a little bit sick.
I know, don't worry.
Yeah, but, yeah, better. Look at my voice. Is
Maybe
yeah, for sure, it always happens. At the end, I end with 57 papers.
then after collecting all the data, after going one by one.
Yes,
Okay,
yes. 57. Yes, but it's common if you have like, I think 60 or 70
Really?
number. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, they say like
For you.
We're going. Oh, that's a lot. Thank you so much. Bring it back.
so. I think that's a good number.
Yeah.
How are you with all the process?
Good. Yeah, I'm trying to do the pizza,
Uh-huh.
but I still I don't know how to solve it. I just copy and paste it. Then I have problems.
With the Excel file or
Yes, I don't know. I'm trying to solve them. I can ask you like a solution.
for sure. Yes.
But yeah, that's it.
Nice.
Anyone?
I've been, but you guys.
I can find out other place.
We selected.
Para julho.
Sí, ahora mi asistente no me quiere.
Ah, muy bien, muy bien.
Sí, pero no viene hoy.
Ven, come.
Ah, el cumple en campo.
Yeah, me too.
Sí.
Or provide.
Una más. No creo que eso sea.
Gracias, para eso. Get everything.
Ahora, fíjate, no.
No? Tipo, tem que chamar da sala.
Estação e research.
Usually.
E eu acho que ele começou a dar. Acho que ele começou a dar volta.
Cara,
Vai longo.
personalidade.
Vai longo. Não.
É que a Ana tava falando que só preencheu algumas boxes lá, tipo, você tem uma completa no. Como ele cumprimento o mínimo. Tá, obrigado. Tipo, fez, seguiu a regra.
Something related.
Se le puede faltar.
Será? Não.
Actually, two of them.
Ah, não sei.
Como é.
Research and training. Sabe mais que eu.
E o Dorival e ele são. Like, I did.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
My name is Andy. I am the chair of the Scientific Communications Committee, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Romulo Lollato for our first event of the semester, and actually probably the last two.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. Good morning. How are you guys doing today? I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, it was a pleasure, Andy, to get your invitation. I know that we went back and forth a little bit on the dates because this is a little bit of a different presentation for me as well. I'm very used to going out there and giving presentation to growers, but I'm not very used to saying, okay, well, what does a presentation need to have, right, for us to give it to growers? So you will see one thing here, a couple of things, right? First, one of the most important things for having a full house in an event. Food, exactly, right? So full house here, I can't take the credit for that, it's the food, right? So first thing on extension events, make sure to have a nice, good lunch or dinner there. And that usually brings quite a bit of people. But I also wanted to pass these around, so Andy, if you wouldn't mind helping me. Now, this is not going to be a wheat talk, even though I am the wheat forage extension specialist. This is not a wheat talk, but a lot of the things that I will show, they are going to be related to wheat, just for example, right? And so what I'm passing out there is just a token you can take back home, hang in our office, or whatever you want it, but just a growth and development poster for winter wheat that we've done a few years back. Another thing, typical extension type of material that we go out in meetings and share it. Very well. You may have seen here, I modified the title of the talk that Andy had proposed just a little bit. Right? And she said she had originally proposed giving successful extension talks. And I just changed a little bit to say, okay, well, let's talk about success and extension talks and some more as well. Right. So let me start because I gave you this wheat this wheat poster. Let me start just showing you some data here from Kansas. And what we're looking at here is the yield history of wheat in the state. Those yellow bars, they go from 2000 until 2015. Average wheat yield was about 38 bushels per acre. Since 2016, this average really came up. We're about 48 now. Anybody here from Kansas? Any local students from Kansas here? Or somebody who can tell me what has been going on since 2016 and why our yields are that high?
4 acres in wheat. No.
More acres in wheat. This is yield, right? So that wouldn't necessarily matter. There's less acres in wheat.
Hybrid wheats?
Hybrid wheats, not quite there yet. We're moving that direction.
Management and genetics.
Those are really good. Management and genetics, that's really good. Some people might say this may even be related to weather, right? But if you look back, 2016. So even though management, genetics, and weather may have played a role, I'm taking a little bit of that credit too, okay? Now, in all honesty, I am leaving behind 2023, right? I look pretty bad. But in my defense, I was supposed to be in sabbatical, right? So I have a little bit of an excuse there. But the reason I kind of like wanted to change that title just a little bit to be a little bit more broad, right, in terms of the extension piece, is because when I was in grad school, I was in the first or second year of my PhD, and I was in an extension program. And at that point in time, I did a class that was talking more about extension, and I learned a lot there. So I wanted to break this presentation down in a couple of different parts. Right. So first, a little bit more general about agricultural extension, and just a little bit of the history as well, because being an international student at the time, I didn't have that history of how things played out in the US. Maybe some of you don't have that either, and maybe some of you can benefit from learning that, especially if you're interested in going into extension later on. And then we're going to go more in detail into extension talks and perhaps how to be effective in giving an extension talk as well. Very good. A brief history here for us to learn a little bit more about extension in the US. You're all in a land-grant university, right? K-State. And land-grant universities here in the US, they have three major missions, as you can see there in that triangle, right? Teaching, research, and extension. So anytime that a faculty is hired, we have some sort of split. It can be a three-way split. Those are pretty rough because on extension, you need to be traveling, and you need to be out there. Whereas with teaching, you need to be here, right? So, but anytime a faculty is hired here in the US, in land-grant universities, you have some sort of split. For example, I am 80% extension, 20% research. Other faculty might be 90% teaching, 10% research, right? So it's really a split how we're going to spend our time in our career there. And it's very interesting to me to think back, 1862. I mean, what was going on then, right? 1862, that's when the US government passed the first Morrill Act, right? Which essentially, it donated a piece of land to those states where a university was going to be built on that piece of land, right? Up to that point in time, there were universities, mostly in the East Coast, right? But out in the country, there wasn't necessarily any formal university or teaching ongoing. So if the 1862 Morrill Act, now there was money invested in each state to build an institution that was mostly at that point in time focused on teaching. Now, a few years later, right, about 30 years later or so, they realized that, well, you know, this is very important. Most of those courses were agriculture and mechanics, but we don't have local data, right? We're teaching these students here, they are getting trained, but we don't have local data on what's important in the state or in these different regions in the state, right? And that's where, with the Hatch Act, the research piece came about, right? And there were a series of experiment stations that were built across the state. Probably many of you may have trials in Parsons, in Colby, in Hutchinson or Bellevue or Tribune. Those are all experiment fields or research stations around the state that, again, 1887, right? That's when there was another piece of land donated to the university that now could actually get the profit to be sold and build those agricultural experiment stations. Now we're being able to develop that local data through research that could be taught to the students in the university. And then just a few years back, 1914 Smith-Lever Act, right? That's when the Cooperative Extension Service was actually implemented in land-grant universities. And think about this, at that point in time, they had research going, local research, they had teaching, so they were teaching the students there, but they were not educating the general population, right? Unless that student was going back to the farm or something along those lines, that information was at the university. It was not getting to the producers or to other stakeholders. And with the Smith-Lever Act, now we have a tool to get that information to the stakeholders out in the state. For some reason, this is not moving forward. Let me. Okay. Okay. And just a map there, all the land-grant universities here, the different years, and of course, we're here in Kansas. So if we focus a little bit more on the extension piece, just in Kansas, you may not be familiar with, but these are the districts and counties that we have in our extension system. In white, these are independent counties. In purple, these are counties that were merged, right? And so in these individual counties here, you may have one agent there who might be responsible for agriculture, for 4-H and other things as well. So typically one person responsible to covering the education in that one county. In larger districts like these, now you have more specialized agents. Maybe you have one crop agent, right? It's a larger area, but it's one agent that will be focused on crops, perhaps another one in the animal side, right? So essentially, in each one of these regions in the state, me as an extension specialist have a partner right there in our county agent or in our district agent who is responsible for the local programming. Now that person, right, he or she, they understand the local needs. They know their producers, they understand what the problems are, and they're the first layer of contact that growers have whenever they have any questions, for example, that can be answered through research here. So they are the ones actually putting many of the programs together, right? They are the ones that identify a need and they come back to the specialists and they ask, okay, well, have a problem with this, and would like you to come here and give a talk on that, right? So again, that's kind of the layer. We have the county agents, the district agents, we have area agronomists as well. These are university professors, right? We split the state roughly in four here. Have northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast area agronomists, right? They are professors, but they are more general, not necessarily crop specific. They're very general in terms of what they research and what they do. But again, probably another set of people there with 80% extension, 20% research, who the county agents can go to and get some sort of questions answered. And just to give an overview, as my role as an extension specialist, again, focus on wheat and forage. In action, right, what extension looks like, it's not only talks. That's kind of why I also wanted to bring just at the beginning of the presentation with a broader focus here, right? We do have talks, presentations, sometimes formal like we're doing today, a little bit closer room and a crop school like this, or perhaps out there, a lot of them out there in the field, demonstration plots, directly showing to growers different technologies or different varieties or different options that they might have to consider to improve their management, improve their profit. Publications as well, radio, TV, social media, and I'm going to talk briefly what I call here bright spots as well. And just an overview here in the last 8 to 9 years for my program itself, right? That's about the impact just on presentations, just over 700 or so. This puts around 80 or 90 a year. And again, so we don't have teaching, but it's a different type of teaching, right? We're out there with growers 80, 90 times a year, bringing them information, right? Bringing them, okay, what should you be considered when you're making a decision on your own farm, right? So it's a very, very close contact to the growers, as you can see here. And remember, we're in Kansas, right? So it doesn't matter the weather. We have had to run from tornadoes before in some of these few days. It happens, I mean. So it's Kansas, and they're going to be there. They're pretty savvy. They want to learn. So again, presentations, very typical, right? Few days and inside presentations as well. Some events organized. Honestly, I'm not the best person to be talking about these. I have done a few in terms of organizing events to growers over the years, but I have a lot of demand from the county agents themselves in their own programming that I don't focus on these as much as some other extension specialists in our department. They do. For example, Dr. Ignacio Ciampiri, he organized a lot of these events on corn and soybeans and sorghum. And so he'll have a different perspective there. But again, other thing that as an extension specialist, as you're planning your career, later on, things to be considered. Timely updates, right? So you guys are all probably familiar with the e-updates you have in the state, right? In Kansas, listserv of over 2,600 people receiving those emails. And a lot of times, as an extension specialist, we need to be timely on what we're putting out. This here is just one example, right? Risk of freeze injury to wheat. So a couple of years prior to these, or sorry, probably a couple of days prior to this map going out, there was a freeze event, and then we had to do an estimate. Okay, how far along is the crop? What's the growth stage of the crop around the state? How cold did it get? Or how long was it cold? Right, and then we come up with something very timely. Just to say here, this is where it's more likely that we might see damage across the state, but we're really only going to know here in a couple of weeks, right? But again, they want to see that information, right? Freeze just came by, the wheat is heading out, they are going to be concerned. And as an extension specialist, again, it's not only about giving those talks, but also bringing this very timely information to our growers. And more traditional, right? Articles that go out on a yearly basis, but not only through K-State, right? Our extension system there that goes out in each one of those offices. They receive copies of those publications. They're out online, but also other sources, right? And for extension material that might not have to do with K-State, the growers are reading. Again, in my example, talking about wheat varieties for Kansas and the Great Plains is a book that comes out every year, and it goes to many of the growers out in the state. So it's a good opportunity to be there and putting our message out as well. Of course, more recently, social media, right? You kind of need to be on top of that as well, whether it is through Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and so on. And you would be amazed how many growers are listening to radio. You'd be amazed. I mean, many times, so K-State has a radio network, right, that it goes out every morning. I think it's from 10 to 11 or 10:30 to 11:30, something along these lines. It's an AM, right? And how many times I've been out in the state and I give a talk, and after the talk, a grower says, well, I listened to you in the radio. And so that was probably the most frequent thing that I heard back from growers in terms of, oh, I didn't know you before, but I listened to you before. So they are really listening to their radio. I mean, think about it, right? You're a grower. Nowadays you have auto steer, sit down your tractor, push a button, turn on the radio, right? And so a lot of different ways for us to reach out to growers. And many times, surprisingly, some of these things like radio interviews, again, being very, very effective. Well, I guess I asked if anybody here was from Kansas. There was nobody that raised their hands. But I don't think you guys, even though nobody here is from Kansas, you can probably imagine that this is not in Kansas, right? This photo is actually from Vietnam, and I like to tell this story here because I think it's a great example of extension. And as we think in our career in extension as well, be thinking on how to use some of these. Now, back in 1990s, Vietnam was facing a very serious problem of malnutrition with children, right? A lot of the children there were malnourished. There had been many projects already that tried to bring solutions to Vietnam, and none of them had been successful. Now, this Jerry Sterling here, he proposed he proposed to try and help that out, but the Vietnamese government was already kind of like, there had been so many projects and none of them had been successful that they said, okay, you can do it, but you have 6 months. 6 months to deal with malnourished children in a country. How do you do that? Anybody has any ideas how we can go about that? Well, what he did, I should say they did, because probably he was not by himself, but what they did was they were looking for bright spots, meaning they were going to each village, they're visiting the villages and they're trying to understand what was going on in those villages. 90% of the children were malnourished, but 5% were good. They're healthy, right? And so they started to ask themselves, okay, what is different with this healthy cohort of kids across villages, right? And so they started interviewing their mothers, trying to understand what was going on. And one big difference, most of those people, they were working on rice fields, right? That's kind of what those women were mostly doing at that point in time. But the children who were not malnourished, those mothers, they were actually bringing back home some shrimps, some collard greens, there were weeds in those fields, right? So between those things, they were actually adding to the rice, shrimp and greens, right? So vitamins and protein, and those kids were fine. So the solution was already there. Many times we have huge problems, but the solution is already there, right? And so in this specific case there for Vietnam in the 90s, they identified these. Now, they didn't go back and say, here, this is what you need to do. They asked those mothers to create little schools, kind of educational schools for the other mothers, and they were teaching their community what to do. So in other words, the solution was already there. A group of people was already knowing how to tackle that issue, and they simply started sharing, and that really improved the conditions. Now, what does this have to do with what we're talking about, the extension in wheat, right? Well, same thing. We need to try and identify growers that they are being able to make it work while their neighbors are not in the same time, right? Perhaps we call them early adopters or just growers that are perhaps more educated, but they're really trying new things and trying to make it work, and sometimes already making it work. And I bring one example here. I work quite closely with Horton Seed Services. These producers, they are out in Leota, probably 30, 50 miles from the Colorado border, so in the semi-arid region of the state. And they are year in, year out, winning youth contests at the state level, at the national level. So they are really being able to grow a crop much better than their neighbors are. So what's the secret? What are they doing differently? In this specific case, they manage the system, right? They are interested in improving their soil. Many years under no-till, history of manure application, phosphorus levels are actually pretty high. Fertility is pretty high as well. So they make sure that those things are taken care of and they really understand their crop. These are growers that you go and you talk to them and they're going to tell you, yeah, well, the primary spike of that crop probably has 12 meshes, where the secondary and tertiary, they're not feeling as well. They know what's going on, right? So if I go there and I have a field day in their field with them, which is this example here, it's an easy one for me because I'm taking the photo, right? I don't want to speak here. I want them to speak because they are making it work, right? They're the ones who are actually their neighbors. They have 100 neighbors there. We're all kind of looking forward to hearing from them and what they are doing. So again, a little bit of a bright spot there, right? Completely different example, but just the idea of what I mentioned before with that example from malnourished children in Vietnam. And just here in this example to expand a little bit, but in the wheat world, quality is very important too, right? That burial wheat needs to be able to make a loaf of bread that stands, right? And this example here, these growers, they are not only making it work in the field, but they are also in their own way giving it a try and making their own breads and trying to see the differences between those varieties as well. So again, it's not only making it work in the field, but it's the whole, if you think of the human nutrition piece of it, like these guys, they are on top. So again, identifying progressive growers who are able to differentiate themselves and making it work among their peers, right? So that we can actually not only ourselves through the university and the information they were developing, but through their neighbors, just empower the other growers, right? Make sure the other growers also have the resources, the knowledge to make it work. Very well. So this is a little bit of an overview on the extension side, right? That's why I didn't want to start right away with the talks here. But all of these, it needs to be well informed, right? Any single effort that we do in extension here, whether it is a talk, a field day, or a publication, or a tweet that goes out or something, needs to be informed by good applied research. So really, I think of these as it's pretty much a cycle, right? A cycle that has in the center there the education of our growers, right? Make sure that we build capacity in our pool of growers there. But that cycle, kind of to me, starts with extension. When you're out giving a talk and when you're out interacting with growers, you'd be amazed how many questions come up. Again, they are out there driving their tractor, thinking about things, coming up with problems that we don't as often, and they will ask you, right? So extension is a great tool to just find new problems, right? That question comes around, you go out and try to see if there's an answer for it already. If there is, just inform the grower. If not, well, there's a new research project that we can go out and try to pitch and get some money to do it, right? So again, using extension to identify problems that are important in the different regions. Then these will inform research, right? So we can actually establish research goals, go after funding, put out some trials. That in the end comes down to the extension again, right? So we disseminate those findings to the group. So again, we need a very applied research program to inform our extension efforts here. I wanted to bring this slide here for a couple of reasons. One of them, because this is a great example of a terrible slide. A lot of text. Avoid these, okay? But I don't want you to read this. This is an example of a terrible slide, and we don't want to have our presentations with these types of slides. It is just a list of the different things that we have ongoing in terms of our applied research program. Right? We're trying to answer questions that growers might have on their day-to-day basis. Cropping systems, seed treatments, fungicides, nitrogen, variety selection, and so on. Right? So just an example here of the different trials that we have ongoing, and this is kind of how it looks like in the field. I do have to thank Luis Pradella. He coordinates a lot of the research that goes there, and all the other students in my group as well, and the visiting scholars, because they do a lot of these development of the applied data that then goes back to the growers. But if you go into extension, one challenge that you have in terms of building your career is how do you do a research that is applied enough, that is relevant to the growers? And at the same time, you collect data or you explore it in a way that is novel enough to ensure that you have a good journal publication. Faculty, right? I need publications out there. Students are coming through the program. They need to publish their thesis as well to be successful, right? And so that's a challenge, right? Because many times, who cares about another nitrogen rate? Another nitrogen ramp. I'm not picking on anybody working on nitrogen. We have a lot of nitrogen trials. But, you know, who cares about another seeding rate response? If we're honest about it. It's important for the grower. We're going to try to publish it later. Where's the balance? Right, so we do a lot of internal discussion and thinking about how do we answer this applied question, and at the same time, we have something that is novel and something that brings the students in the program good research publications. So again, I need to thank the group, right? These are the people who are actually out there doing a lot of that research work and getting a lot of that data that goes back to our growers later on. So this was the first part of the talk there, right? Talking a little bit about overall extension and other things that go beyond the talk itself. Then here, I put some thoughts into when I'm putting a talk together, what are some important things that I'm keeping in mind, bringing some examples of previous talks that I've done as well, whether it is a good example or a bad example, it's here, okay? So first thing that we need to be thinking when we're putting together an extension talk is, who is your audience? Who are we talking to? As an extension specialist, can you guys tell me who would I be talking to in these meetings?
Growers.
Excellent one. Growers, yeah.
County agents.
County agents, that's another one as well. So it'll be down my list, but county agents, it's there as well. So growers, seed producers, it's a different audience. Seed producers, they are very high tech. They know exactly what they're doing for the most part. Whereas growers, you have a little bit better, a little bit wider distribution. You know, you have those that are very on top of what they're doing, but at the same time, you have more general population that might need more basic training, right? So it is a different audience if we're talking about seed producers. Commissions, right? Commodity groups. In my case, the Kansas Wheat Commission, they are the biggest client. They fund a lot of our research, and they are representative of the growers, and they really help us spread our word, put out a publication out. We just put on the K-State website is a given hit. Put a K-State and Wheat Commission website, much better in terms of reaching our audience. Right, so that's part of our audience too. Station agents, just like you mentioned, right? They, again, just like seed producers, they're probably at a different level there, and we can go a little bit more in depth and explore a little bit more the principles of what you're talking about, some of the physiology, some of the ecology, really going into the processes, whereas you probably don't want to do that with the grower, right? Certified crop advisors, another very sharp bunch. They are good as well. You know, they know what they're talking about. And so we need to bring information that may be at a slightly different level than what we're talking to a general field day with growers. Industry, working a lot with industry that are involved in the production of new varieties as well, right? Syngenta and Bayer and other companies that are producing varieties, all the way to the ones that are in the chemical fertilizer world. Industry as well, but now on the end use. In our case for wheat here, milling and baking, right? Many times, what can a grower do in their farm that is going to impact the milling and the baking attributes of that wheat? Whether you're talking corn, what can you do in the farm that maybe is going to have a higher ethanol yield later on if there is something that you can do, right? So end user, a protein plant, perhaps, right? All of these are different audiences that we might have depending on the type of meeting that we're having and require different focus on the talk as well. And finally, a group that I wasn't expecting being as involved with as I have the chance to be. It's kind of an odd group that is like traders and bankers, crop insurance, right? It's just like people who are somehow involved with ag, but they're interested in knowing, okay, how much wheat is going to be produced in Kansas this year, because I need to take a position in the stock market. If production is going to go down, I'm going to buy a lot more now because then the price is going to go up, right? So it's the type of things that we don't think of our traditional audience, but they are there. And many times we have meetings that are focused on these folks as well. So again, there's a range. I put these as the ones that came in my mind. There's probably some that I'm missing here as well, but these are examples of audience that we may have and that we may need to tailor our talk based on the audience. Another important thing when we're talking about knowing your audience is here. This is the average age of producers across the states, right, by county. And you see that Kansas, just being Kansas, right, there's a very large variability. The entire range that you see there, we can find within the state. From fairly young producers, less than 56 in the West there, to perhaps over 60 on average in more the central part of the state. There's a range in ages of our producers and also a range in how we need to reach them, right? Because a producer that is 60 plus, he may be a producer who is out there in 3 field days a year, right? He's there for the food, right? He's there for the network and for the social interactions and maybe to learn a little bit too. But you got a producer who is 30, he doesn't want to touch a meeting. If he can't get it on his phone within 2 minutes, he doesn't want anything to do with your information, right? So we have a range here of ages that we need to account for as well in terms of how we go about delivering that information. And here's just a change in the age of producers between 2017 and 2022. Again, it seems like we increased young producers, less than 35 years old, a 4% increase. And we also increased the older ones, right? More than 60 years old. So again, there's this gap that seems like might increase. You might have these two groups of growers, the ones that are very used to more traditional extension and like to be out there and to be out in a field day and interact with others. And the other over here who, again, don't want anything to do with being perhaps in that type of social interaction. So how do we reach them is also needs to be different. Then number 2, right? Have a very clearly defined message. And sometimes it's very easy for us to kind of get lost in these and try to put as much as we can into a presentation, right? And when we do that, we run into the risk of getting too broad, right? And shallow and not really covering, not really bringing home the message that we really want, right? So now what do you really want the audience to learn from the talk, right? That's one thing to be thinking about. And here are some things that I do with my own slides, which this slide itself is already contradicting this, but for the most part, I try to keep, that one slide, one single clear message, right? What do I want you guys to learn from that one slide? Let's try not to get things too busy. You put 5, 6, 7, 8 graphs there, it's very hard for us to see, right? For the audience to even learn what's going on. Avoid excessive text, just like I mentioned before, right? In that terrible slide that I showed you before. That's not a good way to go about it, right? Keep it simple, keep it straightforward. I even read this somewhere that slides not being useful without the presenter, meaning there's a photo there, right? If the presenter is not there to tell about that photo, probably other people wouldn't be able to, right? So think about this, try to keep it simple, try to keep it, avoid excessive text, using larger images. And again, in a presentation itself, a few messages to take home, not too many, because again, just watering the message if we try to put too many into a single presentation there. Now, in a position as an extension crop specialist, the one that I have, the one that Ignacio has as well, and many others around the country, we do run into a challenge, right? And the challenge on being a crop agronomist in extension is that, as I showed you before in that slide with all the research that we're doing, we're touching a little bit on basic agronomy things, but we're touching a little bit on variety selection, nutrient management, disease management, insect management, weeds, irrigation, and so on, right? So our research spans a lot of different things here. Now, I'm not a specialist in many of these things here. I couldn't start talking about insects. We have extension entomology to cover that part, right? Or diseases, extension plant pathology, and so on. But the challenge that I want to bring here as a crop agronomist, if any of you go into that direction, right, is that it's very easy for us to step on other people's toes, right? Because it is a general, okay, how do we manage this crop? I want to talk about nutrient management. Well, we have Dory Park, who specializes in that, right? I want to talk about disease management. We have Kelsey that specializes in that. And so we need just to be careful, right? To make sure that, and again, because we have data kind of across many of these topics, going out in a presentation, trying to dump the whole thing, the message is not going to be clear in the end. Right? So again, focus. Today I'm going to talk about variety selection. You go there and get out there with a very clear message, what traits the growers in that region should be looking for, right? Or if it's nutrient management, I'm going to talk about nitrogen and sulfur, right? And so just very easy to fall into this kind of trap. Another thing that I try to do in my own extension program here, when I'm coming up with talks, is to bring data that is not only new, that we're collecting every year, but is also local. Take a look at this map. This map here, if you're not familiar with the tool TAD, is an excellent tool. So what we're looking at in this map here, the shade colors that you see is wheat area in Kansas. The different colors here, they're a combination of weather patterns with soil characteristics. So let's give an example. South Central Kansas, we probably have high temperature accumulation, right? We have lower variability in daily temperatures. So these zones differ from these here in terms of precipitation and in terms of temperature. Now, right there, we have three zones that are very near each other, right? A purple, a pink, and a yellow. These are different soil water holding capacities. Have a soil that holds more water is going to be any drought or any management that you do to that crop is going to have a given effect. In a different soil, it holds more water or have other characteristics again, that same management practice might have a different impact. So if I'm collecting data here in Manhattan and I go to Tribune to try and talk to them about wheat management, so different. So different. And in Kansas, you have a very good opportunity here. We pretty much have an open field laboratory with this variability, right? You look probably in Indiana or Illinois, you might have 1 or 2 zones there max. We have here, just for wheat, for us to represent 70% of the crop, we need 14 combinations of weather and soils. That's a huge variability. Now, there's a good opportunity. Again, it's an open field lab. We can put trials there, and in 1 year you get huge variability in the response. But exactly because of that, we need to bring the local data to our growers. Again, I'm just here in our backyard collecting data in the North Farm, and I go out there, Garden City, they don't care about that data. Because for them out there, Garden City, different set of environmental conditions, different set of soils, they need local data. And this ties again with what we talked before about the experimental field and the research stations across the state, right? They are somewhat placed in a way that we can maximize what we're taking out of the weathers and soils from Kansas. But again, we need to be collecting that local data. Another question that I asked myself over the years as I was giving extension talks, right, is the source of the data that we're bringing to growers. Now, not talking about region, I'm talking about source. Does it matter, right? data source, doesn't matter. And this is an aerial photo that we took from one of our research locations. Again, very typical type of trials that we run. We go out there, we put our small plot replicated trials, we have different nitrogen rates, fungicide treatments, varieties. And in the end of the year, we combine all this together to try and bring to growers management opportunities or recommendations for that. Now, to answer the question whether data source matters, I'm going to walk you through an example, right? In this example, I'm going to talk about planting date. And I'm going to show an example first with this type of data right here. Okay, collected from small plot research over the years. And this map here shows a study that we published a few years back with data from Colorado, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Variety trial data, 20 years of data, right? 100,000 observations of yield. Pretty large, pretty nice data set. And what we've done here was we broke the region into similar weather patterns. So the different colors that you see here, they're different weather patterns, right? Light green there is cold and dry, Colorado, right? And dark purple here is more humid and much warmer, right? So we broke it down into regions of more similar weather pattern. Again, so we have those local recommendations. And each one of these points that you see, the circles, they are variety trials conducted over the years. The side of that circle, more data or less data. So essentially, for each one of those climate zones, we went ahead and we tried to define optimal planting date for wheat. So let's look at region 1, cold and dry, and region 9 here, warmer and more rainfall. Again, keeping in mind, this is all small plot research data. So here, in the cold and dry, right? What we have is so we have planting day and day of the year. We have a much sooner optimal planting date up there. And a much narrower range as well, much more steep loss in our yield potential than we do in the south, where we have warmer conditions, more moisture as well. Our optimum planting date here, 265, over there, 285, 20 days later. And not only that, we're not seeing that steep decrease in yield, right? So this is the main message here. Earlier sowing date in the west, a lot of things that make sense there. We don't need to get into the details. Later planting date in south central and less steep yield loss there. This is kind of what we came up with in terms of optimal planting dates for winter wheat, depending on the region where we're studying. So September 25th up there and about October 13th down there. Let me tell a little story here before we continue with this one. Couple of farmers, now they are from southern Brazil, right? Couple of farmers here that they love to fish. They just love it. That's what they do for fun, right? They take a break for farming and from their, they go and they travel for fish in terms of vacation, right? Now, this one time, two of them, they rented a single engine airplane, those very small single engine airplanes, and they flew all the way to the Amazon, right? To do some fishing there for a week. And this guy, he got a 150-pound catfish, huge catfish. Now, this was before the iPhones and everything. So he wanted to bring the fish back, right? To show that he actually got that, but otherwise it would be just a fisherman's story, right? Well, the pilot of that little airplane was not very happy. He was saying, there's no way we can do this. You're heavy, I'm heavy, and this fish is too heavy. We can't. I mean, the airplane doesn't have the capacity to take us with this fish. But farmers, right? Can be kind of stubborn, right? And so, no, but I really need to take this. How is everybody going to believe me? And so on. And the pilot was firm. Said, no, we're not taking this. Now, after 10, 15 minutes discussing that, the other farmer said, well, but wait. Last year, we had the same size airplane and got about the same size fish, and the pilot let us take it back. So the pilot now was kind of like, okay, are you sure the same size airplane? Yeah, I'm sure. So they were so convincing that they were able to convince the pilot to take the fish back, right? So they hop in the airplane, the two farmers, the pilot, and the fish, right? And they start going and going as the airplane's taking off, comes down and crash. It was too much weight. Now, nobody got hurt or anything, right? But the pilot was mad. He was mad. He was not happy with that, right? But these farmers start getting out of the airplane and cleaning themselves from all the dust and so on. They start looking around, and then he goes, well, I'll be darned. Isn't this the very same spot where we crashed last year? It was impressive. Had already done the same mistake once. So the reason I'm telling that story is because if we keep doing things the same way, we're gonna keep getting the same results. The example of the farmer there. Now, why I tell the story is because now we're trying to look at a different type of data. So again, historically, that's the type of data that we have been looking at, small plot research. So let's try to look at a different type of data and see what we can learn. And that's when we went out in the state and we interviewed farmers. We sat down, farmers. I had a student, Brent Janish, he did a lot of this. Kaylin Fink did that too as well, but for alfalfa. And each one of these points that you see here, again, in green is the wheat area. Each one of these points that you see is one field from which we got data from, right? This one field here at this exact GPS location, what was the planting date, variety selection, what was the nitrogen rate, fungicide, everything. Probably a good 30, 40 questions there. The farmers gave us about that specific field. And then with these, right, this type of questions, field location, planting date, variety, tillage practice, and so on. So a lot of different questions. So what about we get and we look at the very same question of planting dates, but now looking at farmer fields instead of small plot replicated data. This is South Central, where if you remember, was October 13th, so our optimum planting period based on long-term variety trial data. Right here, we kind of have about the same thing as we were looking for, just the quantile regression, the 95th percentile of yield, because we're interested in yield potential there. How does yield potential reduce with planting dates here? Peak October 14th. If you remember, again, it was October 13th on our small plot data before. So very, very similar. And, you know, we're losing about a bushel per acre per day for every day that we're delaying planting in terms of yield potential. But if we get to later in November, we're going up to 3 bushels per acre per day or so that we're losing in yield potential for delaying planting date. So very similar story with a different type of data, right? Same thing in Western Kansas. Remember, I think that it was September 25th on the other one, September 28th here. And remember that the other one had a much steeper curve on the west as well. They were going anytime after October 5th or 10th. 3.5 bushels per acre per day that they're losing. So again, very practical information, you know, with two very clear things here. When they need to be shooting for, how much they're losing if they're not there, right? Same story coming from two different data sets. And the impression that I have had when I'm sharing these, right, in one presentation sharing small plot research data, 100,000 observations. The other one sharing farmer data, 700, much less, much fewer observations. Is that I got so many more questions coming from the audience if I'm showing their own data. Because I'm putting the blame on them, right? Well, this is what you told me you did. So it's you're the one to blame, but this is what we're finding from what you told me, right? And again, that data coming from them being something that seems to get a lot more engagement, at least in what I could feel from these presentations. Now, of course, this is anecdotal, right? It's just what I feel, what I felt from those presentations. But just this year, earlier this year, Carlos here in the department, he published a survey. And what did he find? Farmers were 40% more likely to adopt practices supported by on-farm research than research conducted not on farm. So I was very happy to see this because it was an impression that I had that when we're coming out and we're showing data that is small plot replicated data, it's very valuable. But for the farmer, if you're showing their own data, whether it is, in this case, large replicated plots, or in the case that I showed you, farmer reported data, they were seeing a lot more value. At least for me, they were asking a lot more questions. Seems like they're also much more likely to adopt the findings from research that is coming from large scale farms. Very good. I love to bring this slide to you guys here. Imagine I'm giving a grower talk and I show this. First, it's gonna take me 2 minutes to explain what's going on here, right? And if they understand, there's a lot of stuff. I don't need them to understand all of these. So again, this is excellent for a research perspective. It's probably the way that we should be exploring a data that is unbalanced, like the farm data that I just showed you, not replicated and so on. But I go to an extension meeting and I show these, I'm losing their attention right away, right? Because I need to then, okay, well, let's look at this data, right? South Central Kansas. Total nitrogen was important. It was more than 97 pounds, right? The first nitrogen stage was important, first nitrogen method, and foliar fungicide. It's too much information. It's really good on a paper, right? Something that is the way that we should be exploring the data, but not for the farmer, right? I mean, it's too much details for them to be looking at and try to understand box plots and conditional inference trees and all of that. So we know, have a PhD, right? Kind of want to show, I mean, we have a PhD, we want to explore that PhD to the max. We want to, that's me a few years back. Probably more hair, less beard. But again, let's keep the PhD, let's do what we need to do internally here. But when we're going out and talking to our farmers or to our audience, keeping it simple, right? So this is an example of the very same data that I just showed you, the nitrogen, the fungicide, and the conditional inference tree, right? Let's compare that group of fields, low yielding fields with high yielding fields. What were their nitrogen rates? Oh, much higher in the high yielding fields. Simpler, right? Straightforward. Same thing on the fungicides. How often were fungicides applied in low yielding fields versus high yielding fields? Double the frequency or more. Again, it's simple. It takes the message home. That's kind of what we want to give in some sort of an extension presentation. It's different for talking research. And here we're so trained in the research, we show what we do, we're going to show our statistical savvy we are, right? But there's the right place to do that. I have a very good friend, Leo Bastos, and I don't know if he said this, but I think that I saw him saying this on Twitter, that friends don't let friends use bar charts. I agree. On a research perspective, there's nothing less. I mean, bar chart is a lot of space. And in a research publication where we have very little space, you don't want to do a bar chart, right? Again, there's so many ways to do that more effectively, to show the data. But when you're talking to growers, you want a simple message to take home, they're very effective. And I learned this the hard way. I learned this by losing their attention in different presentations that I was giving kind of over the years. Another very important point here. We all know if you want to eat chicken nuggets, there's a right way to go about it, right? Start with the chicken and you make the nuggets. Now, what happens if you try to do the other way around? You start with the nuggets. You got something like that, right? And the reason why I'm bringing this here again is because I'm just telling you that on-farm data catches their attention more. But we need to be careful with that as well, right? Because there's a few things there, depending on the type of on-farm data that you're getting. It might not be replicated. You might be looking at some correlations, and you might be putting it out as a causation. And I promised that I was going to bring things that I think that I did right and wrong. And this is the one that I know I did wrong. Same farmer data that I showed you before. And I'm here putting the fields, whether they were applying micronutrients or not. 10 bushels per acre difference. What does this tell a grower seeing this chart? I'm buying micronutrients tomorrow, right? If I'm getting 10 bushels per acre out of that. But that's the wrong way. I mean, what is going on here, right, is the way we're talking about this data, it cannot be the micronutrients increased yields. Not when it's not replicated. If this was a replicated trial, yeah, go ahead and do it. On-farm data, where there's a lot of correlations going on there, not necessarily causation, right? Probably the right way to do this is that fields that were receiving micronutrient yielded about 10 bushels more than the ones that were not receiving. But they might have gotten fungicide. They might have gotten more nitrogen too. Who knows what else was different between those fields, right? And so again, just being careful on how we're putting out the information out there. I know that when I put this graph out, I said the right thing, but what sticks to their mind is, oh, 10 bushels more on the micronutrients, right? So just avoid anything that can be confounding like that, and can come back to you. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind, photos. Make sure you take as many as you can from your projects. Because what they say with one picture worth 1,000 words, it's true, especially in extension, right? These two plots here, they have the exact same thing, same variety, same nitrogen rate, everything is the same. The only difference there, 20 pounds of sulfur per acre. I can show a graph of the yield, which is pretty impressive too, but the farmers used to seeing these when they're going out and scouting their own fields, right? And say, oh yeah, I've seen my field do these before, so maybe I'm missing some sulfur out there, right? Give context to it. This photo here, very sandy soil, low organic matter. I don't expect this type of response in every single sulfur trial that we put out. Again, going through all the way to maturity. If you have problems that you can show them as photos, I always try to do that as well, either to complement your data or just to use that information by itself. Take a look at this. Our wheat growers in Kansas, they plant in pounds per acre. They don't, it's almost like they don't care about the seed size. I'm planting 90 pounds per acre. Now look at this, same variety, just with a little bit better seed cleaning. We can go from 17,000 seeds per pound all the way to 12,000 seeds per pound. So if the growers here are keeping that flat rate in pounds per acre, they're putting either 1.6 million seeds per acre or 1.1 million seeds per acre. Seems a little bit basic, especially if you're working in corn, working in soybeans, where they are mostly already doing on population basis, right? But still a lot of the wheat is grown on a pound basis. And again, these tells the story much better than like putting graphs here, right? Just show them the difference in seed size, how it affects what they're actually putting out in their fields. Other examples here, right, that are very visual. There's 3 situations where I mentioned that phosphorus in furrow is money in the bank. One of them, acid soils if they don't want to lime that year. Again, I can put whatever graph I want here, it doesn't tell the same story, right? Or late planting. If you're planting late, right, then there's not going to have enough temperature for that canopy to develop. A little bit of phosphorus in furrow goes really long ways. Or in grazing, right, just the difference in biomass being produced because of that grazing. So again, visuals, right? Try and bring as many photos as you can. Make sure to take photos from your own trials. These from Dr. David Nielsen, Colorado. But again, if we're looking at straw management, whether you're harvesting using a conventional header or header where just pulling the heads of the wheat out and that stubble is remaining standing, how much snow retention can be because of the different stubble management that you have. Again, showing this photo for a grower in semi-arid Kansas there in the western part makes a huge difference. So, oh, I might consider this because this is a lot of moisture for my next crop. And you can put some infographics together as well. We recently worked on this here. It's the same story, right? We have the residue, retention, there's no retention and every other things that are going on because of how we manage their residue. So again, infographics, but photos, it just tells the story that we want to tell so well. And finally, I think that the last thing that I'm going to bring here is tools, right? If you have online tools that are going to make their life easier, make sure and share them as well. And this specific example here is from Colorado State. It's a tool that was developed by Colorado State. So many times Kansas growers have a Brazilian person talking to them about a Colorado tool, right? But that's fine. I mean, what is important is that they take home a tool that they can use. And in this example here, it's a simple variety selection tool. And I go over and I explain to them how to use that tool, right? And what they can take out of that tool and so on. And don't need to go into details here, but just again, kind of walk them through how to use those tools that might make their decision easier in the farm. So just some take homes there. And I started this talk saying have 3 or 4 take homes. And again, I'm contradicting myself here, but these are some things that I mentioned, right? Know your audience, clearly define the message, make it local, make it simple. If available, use on-farm data. Sometimes it's not available, and that's okay too. Share useful tools. And then a few things that I did here, but I did not necessarily talk about, but bring in some resources, right? Have them open up and take a look and so on, and that's good as well. Use some humor, tell some stories as well. People kind of like to hear stories, right? And so again, this kind of just a wrap up on some of the thoughts that I had as I was putting this presentation together here. And because I'm telling you to tell stories, I want to finish up telling a final story here for you guys today. So this story is about the wisdom of the world. So back in the day, many thousands of years back, a king, he wanted to have the power of knowledge, right? He wanted to know about what wisdom's out there. So he gathered all the academics that he had access to, and he asked them, I want you to go out and I want you to bring me what is the wisdom of the world. So those academics went out, right, and researched and spent months doing that. And they brought back, they met with the king again, they had 10 books. Here, this is the wisdom of the world, right? Listen, I'm a king, I don't have time to read 10 books. You go back and work on this again, I want less. So they went back and they worked for another several months on it. And finally they were able to bring it down to 3 books. What do you guys think the king said?
Go again.
Same thing, I'm a king, I don't have time to read 3 books, bring it down. And they kept on this cycle, right? And weeks go by and the academics come back with 10 pages finally, right? The king was still, I don't need 10 pages. Bring this down. What is the wisdom of the world, right? And these academics, they didn't know what to do anymore, right? But they kept working, And finally they came back, the king, with 1 page. What do you guys think the king said? Too much. Go back, work on it. I don't want 1 page, right? So these guys go back and they work on it. And they're finally able to bring it down to 5 words. Now the king was happy. He was happy with that. 5 words that summarize the wisdom of the world. And those 5 words were, there ain't no free lunch, right? Meaning, we need to work hard to get our things done. Right, nothing's gonna come for free. If you're gonna give a good extension presentation, you should go out there, you should work on it, you should bring it down to the basics, right? You wanna do a good research project, there are no free lunch, you need to be out there. You need to be collecting your data yourself, right? So again, the wisdom of the world summarized in 5 words, there ain't no free lunch, right? We need to be out there doing our work if we want to get good results. Folks, that's what I had for you today. I'll be happy to take any questions, if you may have any, or any discussions.
Yeah, one of the issues about extension, when you look at the 3-legged stool, research, extension, and teaching, is quantifying the impact overall. When you've got grants for research, T-vals for teaching, what type of advice did you put for providing evidence or saying, how do you quantify the impact of extension or your extension program on your stakeholders?
That's an excellent question, and that's probably the toughest one to start with out there. But how do we quantify our impact? I don't think that there is a right way to do it, right? I mean, you have different ways that you can come up with a number there, and you need to try and provide some backup of how you're going about it. The way I've attempted, and again, it's probably not right, but the way I've attempted to do this in the past was, we have all this research ongoing, right? If I'm comparing to farmer practice, how much is each one of the practices that we are recommending new bringing in terms of market breaker for that farm? Theoretically, if we're talking about an average farmer management, and we're talking about a better variety selection, that might be another bushel or 2 per acre there, something that maybe necessarily didn't cost him much. That's maybe $6 an acre. So what I've tried to do in the past is we have all this research ongoing on the different topics. How much compared to a grower baseline, the kind of goes back to that survey that we've done over the years, right? What's the baseline? How are our growers managing their crop today? And then, however many extensions event I've done times the number of growers in there, then you needed some assumptions, right? Well, what's the percent adoption that is going to come out of your talk? 5%, 10%? I don't know. We can probably get to that through surveys in those meetings, right? So doing a meeting, asking them if they learned something new that they're going to adopt in the farm, and then trying to use that factoring with all the research data that we have to back up maybe more profit from each operation. But I don't think that there is a correct way. There's ways that we justify those assumptions. But I'll be very interested in knowing your opinion as well, how you've gone about that over the years. That's probably how I've done, but.
Well, having done this over 25 years, evaluations, now it's going to depend on the audience, but see, I do a lot of master gardener, commodity, same as you, is evaluations are very helpful. Emails and letters indicating a change in behavior are valuable, and record everything, like the phone calls, the messages, emails. That's the only way you're going to indicate to whoever the higher ups are that extension is going to have some value, because they're matrix based right now and they want some type of quantitative information. But and also just, so that is part of it overall. But yeah, it's difficult because it's going to vary depending on the commodity group and the discipline overall. But change of behavior, that is the impact you're having from the producers themselves, is going to have the greatest impact in terms of what I've experienced over my career. Yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. And so my follow-up question kind of is when you look at surveys going back in the 1970s and 80s, indicating where producers get their information, extension kind of falls in like the 20 to 25% range, where most of that information comes from crop consultants, tech reps, and things like that. I mean, the question we always, how do we raise that percentage closer to 50, whatever percent? And I know it comes back to the fact that extension personnel have been cut so much, people retire, they have filled the positions. Extension is going to be regionalized pretty soon. It's not state by state anymore. What are your perceptions on that? How can we raise that percentage up maybe 20 points?
Yeah, I agree with you. And not only that, I think that the tendency is that it's even going to go down further, right? And I say that because some of the grower meetings that I do, maybe we have 90 people there, 5, maybe 30-ish, the rest are on that older group. So we think how things are going to move, right? I think there might be a discrepancy there. I don't know the answer to that. I think that one thing is trying just to reach them differently, right? So again, perhaps our extension bulletins and publications, they might not be looking at that. Do we need to be putting all those informations in the palm of their hand? So that could be something. And another thing that probably comes to mind is kind of educating the educators, right? So if they're getting their information from the crop consultants, now can we get a higher impact by focusing our efforts on crop consultants? Because they need to get information from somewhere. We have the structure of, at least in the agronomy side, the certified crop advisors that they need to get continuing education units, right? And so perhaps focusing more on their advisors rather than the group, or a combination of both. I think that's quite regional too, at least in my day-to-day. We do a meeting in central Kansas, there's a lot of growers. Do a meeting in western Kansas, there's a lot more crop consultants and advisors. So I think that that's a little bit regional as well, at least on my perception on the wheat side. But I think that it will be a mixture there of trying to be update and getting that information in the palm of their hands as easy as and affordable as possible, and educating the crop consultants as well. That way our reach is not a single farm, right? But if they adopt something across multiple farms, we have a higher impact, higher reach there. Did I miss anything? What did you have in mind?
I think it's a question we have struggled with over the years. We actually, the interesting thing is when we actually train the crop consultants when they come to our classes. We train industry professionals when they come to our class. And so they're taking our information and going out there and using it to make money. And so that's one of the issues we have, but it's part of the extension education outreach program, basically. So I think we need to keep these people held accountable too, for the information they're using. But it's very difficult right now. Like I said, that percentage has not changed probably since the 1970s or early 80s, about 20% range. And like you said, I agree, it's going to probably slip down because of the fact that most states don't even have extension entomologists or extension personnel anymore, because it's, when you look at budget cuts, what gets cut first? Extension over teaching and research.
Yeah, these are great questions. And just to give you guys some background where it's coming from, right? It's like, how do we show our impact to higher administration? Make sure that we're relevant, right? And that it goes back to Topeka, and there's money coming back into extension. And so it gets, when we're in the faculty, we get a little bit more on the politics level there as well. Questions though? Any other thoughts? Any other questions?
You mentioned a lot of different kinds of audiences. Which is your priority?
Yeah, that's a good one. We have the ones that I mentioned are the ones that I typically work with, right? But probably I would say 70% are the growers themselves, right? And then I put, both seed growers and grain growers. Then a good 20% will be, well, commodity groups are part of the growers there as well, right? So commodity groups and growers and so on. Then crop consultants and advisors. We don't do as many programs, at least I don't, with them. But I know that the ones that we do, they have a pretty large impact as well. So those will be primary ones. And then I think that the remaining ones, they're probably in that total goes to maybe a good 10% or so. And I give you these numbers out of my head just based on people kind of trying to look back and see how often I'm talking to each group, right? But growers, absolutely the primary one, including seed growers, commodities, and so on. Then crop consultants coming next. Yeah.
Any more questions?
So is that 80-20% is reflected on your time or not really, just a title?
Oh, I think that maybe after Luis came on board, I'm a little bit more towards that, but before it was like 100. Luis, I need your help, man. And he is taking the lead of a lot of the research things that we're doing. So, but no, it's, 80-20, it turns out to be 100 and 100. And the way I look at it is when you have extension, right? But you want to also build your name nationally, internationally on the research side and so on. As long as you're doing your extension well done, nobody's going to complain that you're doing too much research. At least that's been my experience, right? I mean, as long as you're taking care of your extension, and you're doing that well done, right? I think that you can afford to play a little bit more on the research side. And in the end, that's what's going to pay the bills too, right? You need to bring those grants, even though they're only 20% research, you need to pay salary, right? You need to pay nutrient analysis or whatever it is. And so you need that coming in. So 80-20, it's more on the paper. Kind of, at least for me, I think that it's probably 100-100 roughly there. So yeah.
So that reflects back on the earlier comment about extension getting cut all the time. If you go back 15, 20 years ago, there was very, very many 100% extension people out there. And now there's some, and I'm one of them, but I'm grant funded, so I'm very specific to a specific topic. But there was a range professional that was extension. There was agronomists that were 100% extension in like 3 or 4 different areas of agronomy.
Yes.
And animal science as well. And they've all just got cut over the years. And it's suffered a lot because of what you just said. They're not really able to do that full 80% extension. I mean, you said you can do 100% of both, but.
Oh, but it's 50-50, right? No, but you're right on.
I compliment you on your comic interjections of your presentation and your advice to everybody, because that's one of the things that I would recommend everybody do. Have some fun in there and a lot of interaction with the audience.
Thank you, and you're right on.
Engage the audience, because that's how they keep their interest.
Yeah.
Especially the older generation, they're there for a reason, get information, that's where you call them by name. I mean, that, on evaluation, that makes the difference, you know them at the meeting, by the time they're done, they know you.
In my presentations, I most often will say, you know, I feel like I'm successful if I don't finish my slides and we just have a good
Mhm.
conversation. And you can do that in a group of this size and smaller. As they get bigger, it gets harder to do that. But fortunately for me, most of my groups are this size or small.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, you know, for doing field demonstrations, you know, find the problems in the field, pull the plant out, pass it around, let growers say what they think about that. So get that interaction going. On the budget cuts, we used to have 200% weed extension specialists in agronomy. My predecessor was 100% extension. I think that Ignacio's predecessor was 102. And so, yeah, it's been losing, we're being squeezed a little bit there on extension.
And the regional agronomists, same story. There used to be more of them covering broader areas. They were a way to kind of solve that problem and make it more localized, but that's suffered too. But fortunately, they're starting to get some of those filled.
Yes, hopefully the last two will get filled sometime soon, right? So, yeah. I mean, within the time frame that I've been on board, about 9 years now, we lost a lot of extension power just in that time frame. Again, budget cuts right away. You know, now we have Dr. Sarah Lancaster doing the job of two former extension specialists. One was focused on sorghum and corn, the other one on soybeans and wheat. She's doing it all, right? Torivar, Ruiz Diaz. We used to have also somebody 100% extension, somebody running the lab, kind of doing it all, and on top with research appointments, right? And so, yeah, it's challenging because the resources, personnel resources, have been kind of going down, and that puts pressure on the other ones, right? Because then you get invited to do something. Maybe I might be doing a fertility talk, for example, right? And so, spreading, well, you get a little bit more responsibilities because of not having the full personnel there.
One more comment, but one of the hopeful things, you showed the county extension and the district offices and mentioned that at the districts, they're getting more specialized. And that's a good opportunity as more of those counties merge into districts or establish their own. That's probably a place where some of that, you know, dedicated extension expertise can come into play.
Yeah, I think that's a good move. Those agents that are crop specific, for example, I think that they are moving the wheel quite a bit, and they are interested. They love that. So, yes.
Yeah, the other issue we're finding is just the high turnover rate in extension specialists and agents. I mean, I think last year 86 different extension agents, and so what happens is it's hard to get stability there. And then they come in and you want to give them like a mentor or somebody who's been there a while to give them the experience. But it's so difficult when we have this turnover rate. I mean, almost every 9 months, basically, is you get people leaving, basically. And so, how do you maintain extension integrity or stability when you've got that level of turnover rate occurring? And it's just not Kansas, it's other states too, basically.
And it's not just extension, it's all other kinds of jobs too.
Yeah. I mean, I think
and probably extension maybe on the one end of the spectrum compared to other jobs.
I think it's across the board. Somebody gave a talk at one of our meetings, a marketer talking how the turnover rate, or it depends on generations, from one job to the next job was 2 years. She said it was 9 months. So it's a higher turnover rate than we anticipated. So again, how do you establish stability when you've got that level of turnover? And we know why the people leave extension. The pay is low, the hours are very difficult, weekends, you deal with boards, you deal with county boards, especially the ones that are regionalized, that have like 3 county boards for them to deal with. That's I don't want to use the term, but it's very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that I have a good answer for that. I mean, we hope that the area agronomists help bring some of that stability, right? But in the end, the county agents are the ones who are putting all those most of those local programs. And so if a county doesn't have an agent there, it's very hard for us to, sometimes, we get a call from a grower who has been doing that tour every year for 30 years. The grower wants to continue doing it. Be happy to do that without the agent, but it is much more challenging. It is much more challenging.
And the fact that other states, you look at surrounding states, in my area, don't even have extension entomologists or people. So what happens is you get questions from other states, and that's why extension is already regionalized in a sense, because surrounding states, other states just don't have the individuals or extension personnel to deal with their customers or their clientele grade or their stakeholders.
You mentioned good online tools. I think that's probably a place where, university extension can probably improve their coverage and have an impact.
Yeah, and we've been looking some of that because, for example, we just in our own program, again, like even example, we have database built research data for years now, right? Can we build something that the grower goes there and he asks whatever question he wants? How much nitrogen should I put in my field? And then he brings all the nitrogen data that we have over the years and kind of helps him make a decision, right? We are taking some steps towards that. That we got a REAP proposal funded at the university level here to work with the computer science, and that's part of our objectives. It's, okay, can we make our database accessible so that growers can go in and ask whatever question they want, right? Now we're just starting to do that, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I think that it may be part of the future on how we keep extension relevant there as well. Is, well, now as a grower, if I have access to asking whatever question I want and compiling all the research data that has been over the years to answer me, maybe we maintain that. But going outside and sourcing to do this is fairly expensive. We were doing, for a simple project, was about $30,000 a year per year, not only in the initial year, right? Per year. So you're going to have us funding to maintain that for however long you want, right? And so we'll see. I mean, I think that's a good way to go. That's a way that we can.
Hey guys, I'm
Brian,
gonna
put something like that
finish
together.
the thing because we are running out of time. But I just want to.
Kind of, I don't know where, yeah,
You guys can keep talking, but for those ones that need to leave, I'm so sorry, but for the ones that need to leave, I know that we are running out of time, but.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'd
Yep.
like to. You guys can keep safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, it was fun. I mean, again, I had to.
I'm sorry that I. Oh, I saw it. So we're. Not the way. No, I know.
Pero en fin.
Yeah.
Más gracias.
Like that.
Nice. Some letters.